Hello and welcome to the Indy Author podcast. Today, my guest is Greg Keogh. Hey, Greg, how are you doing?
I'm doing wonderful. Thank you so much for having me.
I am pleased to have you here. And to give our listeners and viewers a little bit of background on you, Greg Keogh is an engineer and one of the founders at Curios. He has spent the last 5 years working in the digital content space, specifically surrounding digital rights management. Greg is an avid reader and is passionate about changing the way authors can earn in the digital age. And so we're going to be talking today about the digital landscape for ebooks and audio. And I think it's very interesting because Curios, as I understand it, was sort of founded initially focused on music. And I think that there are a lot of ways that what we see in the indie author space for books comes a little bit behind what others are seeing in the music space. I'm curious if that's borne out by your own experience.
Oh, yes, 100%. Yep. So, what's really interesting for us is when we first started the company, we were focused almost entirely on music. We knew we wanted to make an open platform for any kind of digital content to have an easy way to self distribute. But we were focused on music. Music obviously has a lot of perversions in that industry, right? If you had a child of yours say they want to be a professional musician, your first response might be like, make sure you do well at school.
So
Thinking
you have an
about the
alternative?
fallback options and things
Yeah.
like that. It's almost always the first thing out of, you know, everybody once they hear those kind of deals. It's an area that needs a lot of help. And then the entire time we were in that space, I kept thinking, well, authors have it pretty good because I buy books. People buy books still. Pretty common to buy ebook, pretty common to buy an audiobook, even buying physical books is still decently popular. And so I kept thinking, well, they don't need the help as much. We're going to keep focusing on music. And then I was meeting with an author, an independent author, Willow Winters, and she was kind of giving, doing a bit of an unveiling of the current state of the industry. And I was pretty surprised to find out what a publishing relationship might look like and then what the platform relationships look like. And that's when we were like, oh my goodness, well, the good news is we are experts at delivering digital content, so we can bring this to the author space and kind of open some doors here, is sort of how things came about. And then we're also pretty fortunate that audiobooks and music files play very nicely. So we didn't have to really do any retooling of tech to enter the space pretty quickly, which was fun.
When you were thinking through the ways that your experience in music could apply to audiobooks, what was your experience in terms of purchasing content as opposed to subscribing to a platform that provides content?
That's a great question. Yeah. So we actually focused pretty heavily on bringing back purchase as opposed to subscription. And a lot of it was just strong opinions held by myself and the co-founder Grant. And it's basically like, as consumers, we're pretty tired of subscriptions everywhere. So it's all like they call it subscription fatigue. And that's a pretty common thing that you see. And it's one of those things where it's like, well, we don't necessarily want it to be subscriptions when it's coming to this kind of content. So a musician and an author, they'll take a long time to make their piece of work. It might take years for them to make a new album, authors years for sure to make a new book, get the recording done, the editing done, get everything packaged up, ready to go. So if you have a subscription-based model, the relationship for the consumer is basically I pay you monthly and you're going to be delivering me content on a regular basis for that payment. It doesn't really apply. It's kind of inappropriate when it comes to books or albums or things like that because so much time goes into the creation of it to then have that supposedly be delivered on a monthly basis seems kind of weird and kind of off. So we're mainly focused on bringing back purchasing as opposed to subscriptions into the space. We also want to do one main thing, and that's like open these doors to passive income. When you're on a subscription and you're required to constantly generate content, it's not passive income. It's actually quite active. Whereas, a book should, upon completion, go off and live and be able to generate income consistently. And then as you're an author and you write more and more novels, as your list of catalog grows, you can be getting sales from every item in your catalog and it can become a pretty meaningful income. So
Yeah.
our goal is to kind of try and bring back a lot of what could be possible, for authors and musicians to have sustainable careers.
Yeah, I think that the episode that will go out, one or two episodes before this one, was a conversation with Johnny B. Truant, who has a new book called The Artisan Author. And he talked about this idea of, rapid release for a period of time. And in some areas of the indie author space still, was feeding that subscription model I think you're talking about, usually in the context of Kindle Unlimited on Amazon,
Hmm.
and that the expectation of high output was really demotivating and painful, I think, for some authors when they had that expectation of you have to be cranking out a book every month or 2 months or 2 weeks or whatever you've trained your readers to expect. Yeah, that is,
Yeah.
I think, the downside of a subscription model that suggests that that kind of new content is gonna be coming that regularly.
Yes, yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that those subscription models have kind of changed the industry. That's definitely one is this pressure on the author to then be putting out more content at maybe the expense of quality. So you might be like, well, I need to get my cadence up and good is good enough. Then we got to get it out there so I can start getting page reads on Kindle Unlimited. And a lot of it has to do with the kind of start of the digitization boom was these social media platforms. Most of the content on the social media platforms is very disposable content. It's quite different from books and music. You're talking about like somebody's reaction to a video or somebody dancing on a screen or whatever it is. It's quick bursts, largely disposable. You're not supposed to be rewatching those things or really diving into it. So that then has created certain models where you can pay per views and things like that. And then now those models are being applied to books and it just doesn't work. The other area that it gets really strange is when you're being paid per minute streamed for audio or you're being paid per page read, you're less incentivized to craft a very beautiful but short item. You're more incentivized to craft long work. So, as you probably well know, as an author, to condense, like writing a short story that's every word is perfect and fits in perfectly in the storyline is a lot more difficult in some ways than writing very long form content, where you're a little bit more free to just put your thoughts onto the paper and not have to craft it as deeply. So you're incentivizing a different form of content, which again can be, in my opinion, a bit of a negative. That's just where it's like there's a lot of things in the space that we at least, it's not necessarily we want to fix just is what it is, but it's more of we want to reopen doors to where that kind of content, a very good short story, could still garner a high dollar amount and be valued.
Well, you had mentioned the idea of the different formats, the ebook and audio and also print, and I just read that for the first time, I think in a number of years, print sales that are tracked by Circana Bookscan went down very slightly, but went down, I think, in the first half of 2025. And one of the kind of conversations that comes out of that is the idea of ROI and the comparable ROI if you're looking at digital content versus print. I know that's something that Curios has given some thought to. What are your thoughts on that?
Oh yeah, definitely. So there's something really interesting that we had noticed over the past, I'd say since, probably about 2020, 2021. And this is largely in the indie direction. A lot of indie authors are creating their leather-bound, very high quality signed editions, like one of 50 sort of editions of their books.
Mhm.
And they're able to sell those at a high premium and they sell out very quickly, right? The fan base is rabid for these kind of collectible items and it's really nice. So the indie authors are able to realize a decent chunk of change, in their space. So they're seeing, okay, in this physical world, I'm able to actually garner a decent amount of income back. But one of my opinions on the matter is that it's largely due to the perversions in the digital world that have kind of forced authors to start offering these kind of items because they're looking at the landscape and thinking, okay, where can I make money? If I'm making money fractions of a cent per page read, that's not driving a lot of income. Or even on the audiobook side, if you're getting, a very small percentage of a credit, it's like that's quite different than selling the books direct. So it's one of those things where, in my opinion, they're just having to find what is available. And, that is a nice piece of content that's available that fans are ready to buy. But if you can bring back income from the digital sales vastly outpace physical, including, the collectible items. So, Curios ethos is the author gets 100% of the sale. So if you sell an ebook and it's $5, you get the full $5. So that's a 100% ROI in a way because there's not any cost of goods post creation of the item.
Mhm.
Whereas when you have, the premium physical items, you've got to pay for the premium paper, pay for the binding, which can be a little more expensive than usual, sign it. So you have to receive the item from the printer, sign it, send the item out. So you've got shipping and logistics and items like that. So it's kind of a lot more to consider. So your return on the investment will be more in like the 60% best case scenario. So it's one of the things where we think if we can bring back the monetization from digital, authors won't have to focus as much on the physical side, and they can like lean into this digital era that we're approaching. I didn't actually know that about the physical sales having a drop. Actually, that's pretty interesting.
Yeah, I just saw that recently. That was from Publishers Weekly. It was like a 1% drop or something like that, but
Hmm.
still, it was interesting. I talked about this with Johnny B. Truant as well, that they called out Rebecca Yarros as one of the authors whose sales was not dropping and,
Yep.
like a bright point of print. And the fact that, if I remember the numbers correctly, she had sold like 3 times as many of the special edition of Onyx Storm as
Hmm.
she had of the regular print edition of Onyx Storm. So, people are really intrigued by those artisan
Yes.
offerings that authors have, but I think that digital content serves a different need, and indie authors want to pick the best thing for both.
Yep.
And I think that another conversation I had recently about print books is the idea that, and I see that you have a poster there in the back that says "Drop the middleman,"
Yeah.
that a lot of the potential profitability of print books is undermined if you're going through a wide distributor like Ingram, where you're expected to give a discount for the,
Yes.
a wholesale discount or a retailer discount or of whatever the term is. And, if you give the recommended amount of 55%, then the profits on print books are like 3 cents.
Ex-
So it's almost like you're just doing it as a community service, not as an
yeah.
actual income stream.
Exactly. And there is a lot of that on an author's journey. We see it, of course. My analogies are always to the musician side too, where there's a bit of a time period of like growth where you might be growing at either a loss or at a break even. So 3 cents a book, it's like, well, at the very least, I am moving books. So people are reading my work. And then that kind of sets the stage for future monetization,
Mhm.
which can be a nice thing too.
Yeah.
So we do understand that sort of world. Where we sit is we think if you're going to operate at a loss or operate at a break even, you want to still try and gain some kind of advantage, from a sustainability and a career standpoint. So it's like if you are getting books out the door and you're making 3 cents or even less, even running at a negative, but you're able to somehow capture the contact information of who's buying, that is then worth the spend, right? Because
Yeah.
obviously you can then go hit those same readers for the next volume, whatever's coming next, or whatever you write next. There's a lot of things you can do. But on the other side of the coin, when you're just distributing through different platforms and middlemen and mediums, you don't get any of that data back.
Right.
So at the loss of that data, yes, you're still growing your readership, but you're not growing access to the readership. And as you know, kind of from everyone's normal life, it's a very busy world. There's a lot of things taking your attention. There's a lot of responsibilities that we all have. So it can be very difficult for even a person to keep up with their all-time favorite creator. You can realize, oh my gosh, they have a new book. And it might have been a year that they've had the new book. And you're like, oh, didn't know that, happily going to go buy it. But it's one of those things where when you have direct access, you can notify the consumer and let them know, like, hey, the book's out. And then I can get excited about something and buy it, sort of scenario.
Yeah. Yeah, we're going to be talking in a moment about what Curios is doing to address several of those challenges that you've described. But there were another couple of points in our early communications about this conversation. And one of them that really struck my attention was the idea of the longer lifespan for content, with the example
Yes.
of, there are songs that go platinum many, many years after they've been released. Can you describe how you see that
Oh,
playing
yeah.
out or possibly playing out for authors?
Yes. So I actually love this topic because digital gets a really bad rap right now, where it's like, oh, the digitization of music and the digitization of books has ruined the industry in some ways. We'd be like, money's not coming back to me. My content is going out there. It costs me money to make this content. Now you've stopped being a creator and it's kind of caused a lot of problems. This is an area where digitization is extremely powerful, though. And that is that content has an extremely long lifespan. When you have a physical book, there's real estate at the bookstore, there's real estate at the library that book has to take up. And there'll be a time span. You release the book, and then it has a time span where people read it, and then it kind of falls off, right? In the physical world, it's largely unlikely that people come back and buy it unless you have a hit that comes much later, and then people start reading your entire back catalog, which is also a great thing that happens, right? But in the digital world, the content has this unlimited lifespan, and it's fresh and available at all times. So at any moment in time, that piece of content, that book you wrote, ebook or audiobook, is available for people to find and fall in love with, and it can grow in virality at any moment, right? So in the music world, we've seen this lately with pretty awesome examples. My favorite one was the artist Kate Bush. She has a song, Running Up That Hill. It was featured in, I think, Stranger Things season 3 or season 4. Really, the biggest scene of the entire series had her song playing in it. And she went platinum in, I think there's like 2022 from that song. Not a platinum song at release, not a platinum song at any time in her career, but 37 years later, the song went platinum, which is like so exciting a thing to happen. And it's not uncommon. I think Fleetwood Mac, who's got many platinum albums, Dreams went platinum after it was like featured on a TikTok video. So we're in this weird time where your work can become virally popular much later. And for authors, you have the back catalog, for instance, but also there's kind of an unending quest for good stories right now. The ability for people to make TV shows and movies is getting easier and easier with technology. As we all know, the best stories are from books. Like the best TV shows, the best movies were books. Almost every single time. If I'm watching a movie and it's really good, I'm like, this had to have been a book. And then sure enough, it was a book. And then I usually buy the book and read it and love it. So it's one of those things where people are going to need better and better stories as this content library kind of grows. You have more and more creators. So the availability for a book to be found kind of goes up over time. And then there's a freshness to it, right? So once it's digital and it's online, it has that potential for virality at any moment in time. Whereas if it's only in the physical sphere, someone would have to come across that book and then read it, right? Which is kind of harder.
I think the nuance I would add is that the scenario you're describing where the book has its moment on the bookstore shelves and then it's gone, which is totally true, but mainly true in the print plus traditional publishing world.
Yes,
And
that's
one
right.
of the plugs that I put in for indie publishing is I have my C's of indie publishing, and one of them is care. And the idea is care of the backlist. So if you've written a book about some event and then, like you've written a book about that's based at Christmas, let's say.
Right.
And so I'm guessing every indie author is going to be promoting all their formats every Christmas, whereas a traditional publisher, they've moved on to the next Christmas book the following year, so they wouldn't do that. But yeah, having that easy, instant access is an appealing thing about indie. And obviously, it's even more instant if it's in digital format.
Exactly. Yeah. And then there's no kind of like loss of quality either. Physical book, if it sits in inventory for a long time, getting it out of inventory and having its quality stay high is tough. But
Yeah.
the digital format's perfect, upon first open.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
The other final sort of trend I wanted to talk about before we talk specifically about Curios is the emphasis is on creators maintaining IP ownership. And I love any opportunity I have to encourage guests to talk about the importance of that.
Yes, and I actually would love to hear your opinions on it too. So, this is a bit of a trend that we're seeing now is there is a lot more emphasis on owning your IP. And I think that trend is like, I'm talking from like 2024 onward. Prior to that, it was still a bit of a mixed bag and people are still trying to figure out, okay, what does digital look like? What is, going with the publisher, signing a record label deal, those kind of scenarios, like, are they still valuable to me as a creator? And we're seeing kind of a marked shift going the other direction. And my favorite example of this is super recent. Now it's, I think, 4 weeks ago, Taylor Swift just bought back her rights and she paid $360 million for this. So we don't know exactly why, like what her motivations are. We can only speculate, but we do know that $360 million is a humongous amount of money. And she's a billionaire, of course, but that would be 1/3 of $1 billion, right? So she's
Yeah.
paying 1/3 of $1 billion to get her rights back, the rights that she signed away when she was a teenager. So we can speculate all day as the reasons why, but you can just see the importance, at least to her, of having her rights. And it's probably not just for, her to say that she owns them.
Yeah,
There's
she's a
probably
savvy
quite a bit of
businesswoman. That
exactly.
will
There's
have been a
probably
well thought
quite a
out investment.
plan
Yeah.
behind that.
Yeah.
And it kind of goes deeper into that. It's, when you think about your IP and you think about your content, that is an asset. If you receive a large amount of money and you give up your rights, the money now becomes your asset and you can theoretically pass the money down. But the IP can be passed down generation to generation to generation, right? If you have a catalog of books that are well loved, they'll be loved in this generation and next ones and ones to come. You can pass that asset down to your kids or estates or however you want to do it. So I think, generally speaking, you don't want to give up assets when you can. Obviously, every creator, every author has to make their own decisions. But if you have the chance to hold on to an asset, something that has that long lifespan, you generally speaking want to. And then this one is a bit more speculative on my part. But I think that the reason we're seeing this trend reversal and people going more into the indie world, or they're caring more about owning their IP. So if they're giving up their IP, they're giving it up for a small contractual period of time, or they're giving up a portion of the IP, not digital and physical, might just be physical, or might just be one format, not all formats. And that's because in this digital era right now, unfortunately, everybody's getting a very small cut of the earnings. The platform that's making the sale is taking a large cut. Any other middlemen in the way are taking decent cuts too. So the final cut that comes back to the creator is pretty small. So if you have a small cut coming back, it's like, I guess if you're talking like a pie analogy, if you have a small piece of pie coming your way for your meal, you have to eat that whole piece. There's not enough for you to then, okay, I'm going to split this off and have a bigger team or whatever it is. So I think that a lot of it comes from that world too, where it's like, well, if I'm not making that much money from it anyway, I might as well own my rights to it. And that way I've got this potential for huge upside if there's a movie deal or something that comes from the IP itself. And then this is the biased take, is that I think that the direct-to-fan world is only improving. So the technology that creators have access to get their work out directly to their readers is only improving day after day. So if you look at the digital landscape now, where companies like our company exist and several others, versus in like 2019 or 2020, those companies weren't really there. So you're making the best decision you can at that time, whereas now you can make a much more informed decision and realize, well, I've got great options that are available to me now. I don't necessarily have to give my rights up. I can try first without giving them up. And if it makes sense for me to give them up later, then you do it. And we're seeing that with several authors, right? They start out indie, they get a lot of independent popularity, and then they're able to sign IP deals that are great. The kind of deals that you would take all day, every day, where you get enough money from the IP that it's like, well, I can give up one asset for another, you know?
Yeah.
So that's my opinion on it, but I'd be curious to hear your opinion on it as, an indie author yourself and kind of what you see as trends in the space.
Well, I love that what you're describing as a move from a mindset that was probably more prevalent even 5 years ago of, "I'm gonna try to get a traditional deal, and then if I can't, I'll just, self-publish." So, those are the 3 words I hate because it's just
Right.
like, I failed, so I'm gonna do, the second best thing. And, self-publishing, I don't like to use the term self-publishing because it sounds like you did it all yourself, which professional indie publishers don't. I like that analogy better of like indie movies. You wouldn't say that a movie was self-produced because you recognize that there is a director and a
Right.
screenwriter and an actor and a makeup person and a costumer, and the same is true for professional indie publishers. I really like that idea that you hit on, that people are looking much more intentionally at the IP that their work represents. And I think that the only thing I would add to what you were describing about look at each format, look at each time period, is also look at each market. There are plenty of people who have said, well, I'm going to keep the IP rights for ebook in the US, but I'm going to license out the IP right for audiobooks in Germany or whatever,
Mhm.
because that's probably income that they wouldn't have gotten anyway.
Right.
And yeah, I think that the other piece of advice I'd offer is that if anyone is in the situation of considering a traditional publishing deal, then the traditional publisher will probably start out with all formats, all markets, all time, and they expect you to push back. And so I am saddened when I hear stories of authors who were offered a contract by a traditional publisher and, the stars were in their eyes and they were so excited and they just signed what was given to them. And that I think there was this fear that, oh, well, if I push back, then maybe they're going to withdraw the offer. But being assured that they expect you to push back and that there's a lot of room for negotiation if you've decided to license your IP in that way.
That's great advice. Yeah, because I agree very much with that. And it's one of the top driving motivations behind our platform is we want everybody to have a default option that they can always take because we hear this quite commonly, especially in the music business, because that's again the one that we're just a touch closer to. The record label will come to the musician and they'll offer them a very low deal. And the musician will be like, well, I have been trying to get my music just listened to for the last 5 years. I'm going to take the deal. It's not really a meaningful amount of income, but maybe it will get me out there further. And then I can become the next Beyonce, Taylor Swift, whatever it is. And I know authors probably feel the same way. It's like they get a publishing deal and they think, okay, great. I'm probably only a couple years away from retiring to my house in Nantucket where I can leisurely write at my own, my own cadence. And the reality is just not really that. And it's one of those things where I also encourage everybody to look very closely at that deal and understand exactly what you're signing away, especially if it's multi-format all time. The characters that you wrote and that you love are now no longer yours. And the story that you wrote might become a TV series, might become a movie, and that won't be yours either. And if you think about the amount of time and care that you put into the story versus what you're receiving, even from an hour's perspective, make sure that it at least lines up.
Yeah.
Does that first check meet your hourly rate that you would apply for yourself sort of scenario?
Yeah.
Because we're very biased, but it's one of those things where when there is an alternative that you can take yourself, it might be a little bit harder of a road, but it's a road that does compound, so it's as you go down that road, it gets better and better and better. So, okay, yes, 5 people might read your first book. Very low number, nothing to kind of write home about. By the time you're on your 5th or 6th book, those 5 people now you've contacted them, they bought each one and it grows and grows and grows to where your email list might be in the thousands. And now you're selling thousands independently. And if you're getting a huge percentage of the cut, or in the Curios case, 100% of the cut, you now have a sustainable career and you're able to kind of operate. And I know that's pretty common for authors is your first few books really won't have that much velocity out the window, especially with a publisher. It's the same case. It's not necessarily going to be picked up and go viral overnight. It kind of takes a bit of a catalog to get that virality going and to get that reader base going. Yeah.
So you've mentioned a couple of ways that Curios is addressing some of these challenges that you're seeing, but just give us some background on what Curios is and what you were doing.
Sure, yeah. I don't know how far back you want us to go, but the co-founder, Grant, he is a ex-musician. So he was a founding member of the bands Lifehouse and Dawes. Both are very popular bands, right? They sell out tours, they sell out shows, great popularity. I think Lifehouse was platinum or multi-platinum. Despite all that, he still had to quit because he realized it's not a sustainable career. He's not able to make enough money being a musician to support the lifestyle he wanted, and he wanted to have kids and things like that. And so he was like, I have to quit. So he quit being a musician, went into tech, and then worked in, digital rights management for years and years. So it was like companies like Spotify, YouTube, digital agencies that worked for TikTok competitors, things like that. So we've been in this digital content space this entire time, and we realized the holes that we've been talking about, where it's actually quite difficult for an individual to sell their digital portion of their work directly. You can imagine, okay, if you write a book, you get the print copies of it, you could theoretically go sell them anywhere. You got to print, you can say, hey, you want to buy my book? Here it is, right? Transaction, which doesn't really happen that way, but
Yeah.
You can imagine it. On the digital side, it's actually quite cumbersome to get to that reality too. Set up a Shopify website, you have to organize the pages, make sure everything works, add a fulfillment end to it so you can fulfill the items, do the email capture, run your email list. It ends up being quite a bit of a technology stack. And we were like, it should be easier for an individual to buy work from the creator. Especially in the digital space, it should be easier for me to buy a book from you than it is to buy your book through Amazon.
Mm-hmm.
But somehow it's easier for me to buy on Amazon. So we were like, let's try and even those odds. And we started with one musician. He was a rapper out of Canada. And it was a good first choice. Very popular guy. He's been super disenfranchised by the music industry. I think he had 2 gold albums. He toured nationwide several times. He said that he cleared about $60,000 from each nationwide tour, which is a great salary, mind you, but he was selling sold out show after sold out show and was like, this doesn't match up. So he ended up going into a lawsuit with his record label and his management team and his agents. That whole rigmarole, finally got out of the lawsuit, became an independent artist, had full control of his music. He was like, I want to sell an album directly to my fans for $1 a piece. Pretty simple structure. He sold 1 million copies of those albums in 6 days.
Oh,
and
wow.
on our platform, you make 100% of the sale. So he made, or it was a team, right? Of course, as you kind of mentioned, his team made $1 million in 6 days. Huge success, monetarily speaking, from anything he's ever had before. And then on top of that, he had every single email address for everyone that purchased. So then he has this, ability to then monetize that, future monetizations and different things he's releasing. So you go from being beholden to your agents, your record labels, your bookings, all the way to being completely self-reliant. And for him, he had a fantastic trajectory. He also had I think 2.9 million followers on Instagram and stuff. So he had a decent audience to broadcast this information to. But that's the root of our platform, I guess, to kind of tie things back to the platform. With that success, we were like, okay, this is something very interesting. We need to kind of go all in on it. So we made, what we're trying to make at least, is the easiest place for a creator of content to sell their content, their digital content, directly to their fans. So for authors, that would just be directly to your readers. So for your ebooks and your audiobooks, giving you a direct option for those. We don't cover print yet. We're working on getting some print on demand solutions in. But the reason we're focusing so heavily on digital is digital does represent the vast majority of sales. Even in a Rebecca Yarros situation, I'm sure she sold a lot of ebooks and audiobooks compared to the physical. Even though she had maybe more physical books sold than most authors, normally speaking,
right?
I bet the ebook and audiobook still outpaced that by a huge margin. So what we're thinking, at least, is for the vast majority of sales, if the author can receive 100% of the majority, then the landscape is going to change for the better. It's going to change for the benefit of the author, and it's going to change for the benefit of the reader. When authors have sustainable careers, you're going to write more books. When you have more audience control, you might write more creative books, right? You might not have to worry about, okay, will a publisher accept something this far out, or this niche? They kind of have what they like to purchase at a given time. And it's like, if you don't fit those buckets, you're not going to get a deal. But when you're independent, you can really be quite creative.
Mm-hmm.
So our main mission is just to open the door so that there is an option for creators to take. We want there to be an option for authors to take where they can sell direct, get 100% of sales, and you get the contact information of who purchases. We have a lot of other kind of tiers beyond that, but that's the root of our platform. And of course, you maintain full IP and ownership of your work at all times. So by putting your work on our platform, we do not own your content in any way. You still maintain complete ownership and rights of your content. You're not giving anything up to do it.
And how is Curios making its money?
Yes, that's always the best thing to mention right after we talk about the 100%.
Yep.
Because it seems off. So we charge a fee to the buyer. So for digital content, at least in the United States, there is no tax. So we basically are filling that role of tax. So we charge anywhere from 1% to 7% per piece of content. And it kind of just depends on the price, right? If it's a $1 item, we're closer to that 7%. And if it's a $10 item, we're closer to the 1%. Mm-hmm. So we just charge a fee on top. So if you were to sell a $10 audiobook, you get $10. You would get the email address of who purchased your content. And then we would charge that person something like $10.95. Some of that would go to the credit card merchant because there's a credit card fee for every transaction. and then some of that would go to us of that extra 95 cents. So that's how we make money. And then on top of that, we do have premium subscription options. The rule of thumb I generally use is if an author is going to sell more than 10 items a month on Curios, it's usually worth it to be on one of our subscriptions. So our subscriptions are pretty competitively priced, and you get a lot of benefits from it. You get increased analytics. You can kind of understand where are people coming from. You get increased exposure on the site. There's kind of a lot of cool things that you can get from those subscriptions. So those are the two ways that we make money.
And do the readers pay anything beyond the price that the author is setting plus the service charge, I'll call it?
No, they don't. So that's it. And it's basically a one-time flat cost, and then they have access to that content forever. One of the nice things about digital is we can ensure that only that person has access to that content, but then we can ensure they have access forever. So it's kind of a nice switch. It's not that common, but when you buy something on Amazon, sometimes it does go away. Amazon loses the rights to that content, and then even though I purchased it, I can't watch it. And that's happened to me with movies more than books. I can't remember it happening with a book, but on the movie side, I've bought movies on Amazon, the rent to or buy option. I'll buy a movie, and then they'll lose their rights, or Netflix will buy the rights, or whatever it is. Amazon will not have the rights to then show that movie, even though I paid full price for it.
Interesting.
And I lose the content. Then you have to basically call. They don't automatically refund you either. You have to call them and then make the case. And then they say, oh, well, we'll offer you a refund. And it's like, why did I have to call?
Yeah.
So it's kind of switching the model from rental to ownership. We're trying to bring back a little bit of ownership in the digital world too.
Yep.
So.
And does Curios have its own reader app?
Yes, we do. Yes. We have our own reader app. However, we work with all reader apps. So all e-reader apps and all e-readers. So if you were to buy an ebook on our site, you could read it on your Kindle, you could read it on your Nook, you could read it on your Kobo reader, you can read it in our app, you could read it on the BookFunnel app. We're pretty much platform agnostic on the consumption side. And our goal is just so that consumers, we don't want them to have to do something different. We don't want them to have to change their behavior where possible. There are some situations where, okay, we need to make sure we're streaming it through our app so we can ensure that nobody else is accessing this. But for ebooks, at the very least, it's really multi-platform, which is nice.
Yeah. I just signed up for Curios, so I've been playing around with it. And one of the things that I'm hoping it will help me solve is that I currently have a PayHip store. And when a sale happens on PayHip, 3 transactions come through. And since fortunately I have someone who handles my finances, I don't know the details, but
Yes.
it's like one transaction for not just like emails, actual financial transactions within QuickBooks. One is for like, here comes the money. And then the other one is like, oh, we've transferred the money around in your different accounts. And oh, now it's landing in this account. And so I'm pretty sure that if somebody buys a lower priced item, the amount of money I'm paying to my business manager to take care of that in QuickBooks is wiping out any profit I'm getting because it's just not a nice back-end experience for the person who's trying to handle the finances. And that idea of being able to kind of sell direct, like you're describing, kind of a new way of selling direct is appealing if I would just get it as chunks of money and not like each individual little thing having to be managed on the back end.
Yeah, actually, thank you for bringing that up because that is one of our strong suits. So we found the same kind of issue. And that is that, yes, you can set up a Shopify store, you can set up a PayHip, you can run these platforms all on your own, and you can figure out, okay, PayHip does handle some distribution, which is nice, or you could go Shopify and BookFunnel combo, and you can still handle it, but it is complicated. So what we're thinking at Curios is, okay, how do we get the benefits of going direct, also paired with the benefits of like being on a marketplace or being on a platform that can handle the pain points, right?
Yeah.
So one of the major pain points when you're selling direct currently, or in the historical kind of ways of doing it, is you are the merchant of record. So your business will be the merchant of record. So say you sell a book in Germany and then you sell a book in the UK, you are responsible for calculating and figuring out what the VAT is, right? The VAT. And that's a burden, right? So that's why you have an individual to handle that, because otherwise you're probably not going to be writing much because you'll be very busy handling the business elements of it. Even if it's just one sale, you've got to figure out what was the VAT and how do I pay it? And like for the UK, you have to have an agent based there and all kinds of crazy stuff. So Curios is the merchant of record. So what you get is per sale, Curios then adds to that sale, any taxes like the VAT that would come in, we then are responsible for paying that. And you as the author get 100% royalty check for the sale of that book from us. Is kind of how it works out, like mechanically speaking. So it's just one flop of money. You sell a $10 book, you get $10 and it's into your account and you're able to then take that out, which is nice. You don't have to handle all of the nuances that come from the accounting side.
Yeah.
In addition to that, there is the marketplace benefit too, right? So when you're running a PayHip store or a Shopify site, you are operating in a bit of a silo where you're kind of off with your own website, and it's now your job to get traffic to come to this place that they don't commonly go to, right? And Curios has this problem a little bit now as we're still growing as a platform, but the more users that come and then continue to come back, then the less friction there is for them to come and buy your book on Curios. When you have to get their attention from wherever they are on the internet to come to your unique website every time you do a book launch or something like that, it requires quite a bit of capital to get those eyeballs to come that direction.
Yep.
Whereas when you've got those habits built up, or if you're already consuming another book in that app, it's very easy for you to then come and grab something else. So we're trying to also bring, aside from the accounting kind of nightmare, the marketplace benefits to authors, right? Where you can have that cross-pollination effect as opposed to just being single silo operation.
Yeah. I can imagine another benefit would be on the customer service side, because I sell my ebooks on PayHip and they're fulfilled both by PayHip and by BookFunnel, which I realize is a little bit of a confusing user experience. And BookFunnel, BookFunnel's customer service is great. And if a reader contacts BookFunnel, they're having trouble getting it onto their e-reader, then BookFunnel will help them do that. But I think that buyers don't necessarily realize that they can do that. And because it's my store, sometimes I'll get those. I can't get this onto my, 15-year-old Kindle. And I'm
Yes,
like, oh
exactly.
no, I really want to get this.
Yes.
Whereas sort of the benefit of having it not look so much like one's own website is that I think that it would be clearer, like people would go to Curios for help. They wouldn't necessarily come to the author for help with
Yes.
those kinds of customer service issues.
And that is 100% our goal, is to handle all those customer service issues.
Yeah.
Because again, we want you to be free to write and promote, just handle those elements of it and then nothing else. There are still some cases where if you told them via newsletter, like, hey, get my latest book, get it here, they might still contact and be like, hey, I couldn't get it. And all you have to do then is pass that on to our team and we handle it, very quickly. So yes, that's our other mission, is to handle the customer service element of it. And fortunately, most of the time, like I mentioned, it does come through our way, because it is complicated. Like Kindle makes it very difficult to send outside books in on the first time that you do it. One of the nice things is the second time we can just do it automatically. So if a user buys a book from any author on Curios and they set up the send to Kindle, and then they buy another book from another author, we automatically then populate that book in their Kindle. So it becomes a bit of a magical experience, but only after the first one. They still have to set that route up, which is a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
And that's where we help,
Yeah. Anybody that can take away those parts that an author does not want to deal with is an attractive proposition.
And what's interesting is, like, authors have become amazing entrepreneurs, especially the indie authors over the last probably say 5 to 10 years. There have been so many different platforms that have come up. The authors are so competent and so adept at getting these different solutions in place. They've kind of been through a lot of different platform iterations. So what was nice was we were able to get all of that feedback and try and combine it into one website that can help,
That's so great. Well, Greg, I appreciate you sharing the information both about Curios, but then just more generally what you see going on in the digital landscape. So please let everyone know where they can go to find out more about you and Curios and everything you guys are doing online.
Yes. So please follow us on our Instagram. It's at Join Curios. And then I also encourage any author listening, just go to studio.curios.com. That's the backend portal to Curios, and just sign up. That'll then get you on our email list, and then you can kind of stay abreast of all kinds of updates we have coming to the platform. So we are constantly working on improving a lot of things. So I think in the next month, or probably I'd say conservatively 2 months, we're adding like a ton of deep analytics for authors. So you can learn, okay, I sold 40 copies of a book. How many times was it finished? At what point did people stop reading it? At what point did people not stop? So where did they not put the book down? All kinds of analytics like that we have the ability to pass back to authors that we know don't necessarily receive. So it's a very easy way to stay abreast of those things. And then my email is completely open to anybody. So you can always reach me at greg@curios.com if you have more questions, or if you want to run over a unique scenario that you got. I'm happy to run that over with anybody.
Great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you very much, Maddie. Appreciate it a bunch.